Marvel Cosmic Invasion recently released on both the Nintendo Switch and the Switch 2, and once again sees publishers DotEmu team up with developers Tribute Games to create a beat-em-up based on beloved comic book characters after their 2022 hit Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Is this one a marvel to play, or is it not quite as cosmic as it claims to be?
Cosmic.
Well, thank you to the publishing team for the review code, and now let's find out. So story-wise then, this takes place after an unprecedented attack is launched across the galaxy, which calls together a variety of heroes, both Earthborn and cosmic, to join forces in a quest to stop the deadly Annihilation Wave. I mentioned TMNT Shredder's Revenge a moment ago, with the Turtles being an IP I'm much more familiar with, I must say. In that game, they were clearly influenced by the 80s cartoon as opposed to the comic book origins of those characters. Here, I believe they have pulled more heavily from comic books, with the 2006 storyline Annihilation being the main thread behind this story, albeit they have pulled from other eras and major storylines along the way. And as someone who's not a particular fan of Marvel, I did get the impression that there was certainly some influence from some of the cartoons of the 1990s, X-Men the Animated Series for example. Although this is just my impression as I played through, that may not be the case. So in terms of gameplay, this is a beat 'em up as I mentioned at the beginning. The action takes place on a 3D plane as you move up and down each of the areas, moving on to the next screen when you've taken out all enemies in classic beat 'em up fashion. What's different here is that each player picks two characters to play as, being able to switch between them on the fly by pressing the L button, but you can also call your second character in to perform a team combo attack with your other selected character. You can play with up to 4 players, both locally and online. I played myself with 2 players locally, playing with my son, and this worked very well. And each of the characters does handle slightly differently. Some characters such as Iron Man or Storm from the X-Men are able to fly. Others such as Wolverine are very agile and fast with their attacks. Spider-Man can swing across the screen at speed, and Venom is much larger, therefore slower but more powerful. There are no specific stats as such that you can look at to see these differences, but you do get a feel for them as you play with each character. Having said that, each character does have stats that you can improve. Characters will level up as you use them, and going into the extra screen will show you any levels that each of your characters have gained. This only happens when you do use characters, so if you neglect certain characters, they will stay weaker than your favourites if you choose to use these more frequently. So just bear this in mind if you do want to keep your cast of selectable characters more rounded in terms of their abilities and strengths. There is a story mode for you to play, and generally this will give you 2 levels to choose from at a time, but you must complete both before you then unlock the next couple of levels. It's not particularly long, you can complete it in a few hours, and there is also an arcade mode, which is the same levels wise as story mode, but you have no continues. And a game over means starting all over again. There are also challenges for you to try to complete for each of the stages in story mode. This could be performing a certain number of attacks with a specific character, finding characters that have been held hostage and freeing them, or performing some sort of special attack between 2 particular characters. And doing this will allow you to start to unlock some of the goodies that are in the game, such as artwork or music tracks. Again, all of this is shown in the extras page. You'll also unlock new characters to play as you go through the story mode, and I do always like it when some characters are locked behind story progression in beat 'em ups. It just gives you a reason to play through again another time. You can change your character at the end of each stage. The stages generally end with a boss fight, and these were quite interesting. You'll need to learn their attack patterns, nothing out of the ordinary for the genre, but these battles were certainly enjoyable to partake in. Control-wise, you have your basic attacks with the Y button. There are more character-specific attacks on the X button. Some characters will have a block move, whereas others have a dodge, again depending on their size. You can jump or fly where applicable by pressing the B button, and you have those special attacks assigned to the shoulder buttons. One thing I would have liked to have seen is a grab move. Some of the characters do have this. Phoenix, for example, has a telekinesis grab, but I would have liked to have seen this be a standard move across all characters, or at least across the larger characters, because there's something just so satisfying in beat 'em ups about grabbing an enemy and throwing him into a bunch of the others that's sadly missing for the most part here. Having said that, it was nice that each character did have specific moves. It does help to differentiate the characters aside from pure aesthetics. Gameplay is classic beat 'em up action, and whilst the game won't take you too long to complete, there is that incentive to keep trying with the challenges and the unlockables that this brings, plus the multiplayer mode in both offline and on the whole it gets 17 out of 20. Controls work very well, and it's nice to do those attacks that synergize between two characters, and it's nice to try different combinations of characters to see exactly what their super move will look like. They get 18 out of 20. Moving on to visuals then, and I mentioned at the beginning that in terms of story it looks as if it's been influenced by the comics. I would say in terms of the general aesthetic, it's definitely got a bit of 90s animation in there, shows like X-Men the Animated Series, but it definitely pulls from the 90s arcade games. Again, there was an X-Men one I seem to remember, and it presents itself very much as if it were a lost relic from the arcade era. This is evident straight away when you start the game up and you see the game's attract mode, and what I assumed was going to be hand-drawn pictures when I first saw the trailer for that attract mode. If you look closely, it's actually pixel-based, which I was very pleasantly surprised by. It does just keep that feeling of authenticity of this being an arcade game from back in the day. There are a number of different locations for you to visit. Again, I'm not an aficionado of Marvel these days, but places such as Genosha, Asgard, and a host of others. There was a level set in the Savage Land that had some great details going on as an aside while you were fighting, but it also reminded me of a similar level in the Turtles in Time beat 'em up from back in the day. Prehistoric Turtlesaurus, I think that one was called. Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing these little details. The cast of characters are colourful. It's great to see characters such as Ghost Rider, alongside more expected characters, I guess, like Iron Man or Wolverine. And whilst the enemies were certainly vibrant and fun to beat up on, you do see a bit of repetition start to creep in as you go across the levels, which on the one hand is expected for the genre, but bearing in mind that the locations were so different, it would have been nice to see a bit more variety here, albeit to be fair, there is an overriding enemy and his minions are wherever you go, so it's expected to a degree. Performance-wise, you're looking at 60 frames per second. This is a Switch 2 review. Now on the Switch 2, in terms of the fighting, I didn't notice any real drops at all. It was incredibly stable. There were some slight drops at certain moments when flying enemies entered the screen. I'm not sure if this was a stylistic choice and it just looked a bit odd for a moment. It's hard to really focus when you're trying to fight the enemies, of course, but there were no issues at all during the fighting itself. On the Switch 1, there were a few minor drops during more manic or frantic moments. Moving on to the audio, and the soundtrack does a fantastic job of keeping that energy high as you're fighting waves of enemies, and there's also voice acting included in the game, and it does seem as if there are specific lines of dialogue for each character, so no matter who you fight with, they will say something appropriate within each level or to their partner, so they've clearly put a lot of thought into making the dialogue feel fluent and cohesive, and I believe I'm right in saying that some of the actors used have played these characters before. The voice actor behind Wolverine, for example, I'm pretty sure also played the character in the recent revival of the X-Men animated series. Was it X-Men 97? And I believe there were a couple of others. This certainly shines through, and the voice acting is of a good standard and supports what's going on screen. Visuals have that chunky look to them that's just so important to me in beat 'em ups. It helps to make you feel every punch as you land them on the enemy, or sometimes, of course, have them landed upon you. They get 18 out of 20. Audio, by the same token, feels tactile and raw, and the voice acting helps to support this very well. It also gets 18 out of 20. Marvel Cosmic Invasion costs £26.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. At the moment of recording this video, for another few days, there is 10% available off of this price, and that price does go for both the Switch 1 and Switch 2 version. Now, in terms of production values, as I've already mentioned, this game feels incredibly impressive. It's got a very high level of polish. It feels like a game from the 90s in terms of the arcade games that used to entice you over to them with those fantastic attract modes, whilst also feeling like something that wouldn't have been possible back then with far more spoken lines of dialogue, for example, than you would have found in an arcade cabinet back in the day. There is some replay value here. You can play through with a number of different characters, of course, and try to boost their stats and level them up. There's the multiplayer aspect to it, both locally and online, and other collectibles to try to unlock. And as someone that's a massive fan of beat 'em ups, a lot of the value in these games is in replaying them. So if that's not something that appeals to you, then it won't ever appeal to you, irrespective of which beat 'em up you're looking at. That being said, it does price itself just north of some of the other beat 'em ups that are available, certainly on the Switch, if not the Switch 2 yet. Perhaps the Marvel license meant the price had to go up ever so slightly. This does make it slightly harder to recommend against some very good competition. On balance, value gets 13 out of 20. To conclude, Marvel Cosmic Invasion is an incredibly solid and fun to play beat 'em up that does everything you would expect from a game in the genre. It doesn't necessarily push the envelope, but then if you're like me, I don't really need my beat 'em ups to do that. I'm quite happy to find longevity in other genres and come back to this one time and again whenever I want a bit of a palate cleanser. If you're not like this, then that price may put you off, but don't doubt the quality of the game because that's most certainly very high. Marvel Cosmic Invasion gets a SwitchUp score of 84%. So there you have it, there's my review of Marvel Cosmic Invasion. Have you picked this one up? What do you make of it? Please do let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget, if you're looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, you can use our website switchup.gg to get your eShop cards, and doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back as cashback. And there are links down there to places such as PlayAsia. If you want to import any games, just use our link and code and you'll save yourself 5% off of your order from there. Thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.